Afternoon class. In this video, I'm going to go over our topic 2 assignment, components of the 5E instructional model. For this assignment, you're going to start building kind of the idea or the outline of a lesson plan based on a standard. So you're going to pretty much show that you understand each of these components of the 5E lesson plan model and just think how you can implement it using the 5E model template. And so that's attached here at the bottom of the assignment directions. Let's go and take a peek at that template real quick. So the template has several parts. For this week, you'll be doing part 1. You'll find in the following 2 weeks, we will be doing part 2 and part 3 as the weeks progress. So for this one, you're going to choose a grade level and a science standard. You can use the same one you used last week if you'd like, or you can choose a different one to explore with. I'm going to use the same one that I've talked about throughout the course of this template, so you can kind of see how I might progress based on one standard. So the first thing you're going to do is identify that grade level and your standard, and you're going to put those in here for me. Then you're going to determine 2 learning targets. So in last week's video, I showed you just one learning target, which was students exploring sound using various materials, and they'll record what they hear, see, and feel. I added one more learning target this week, which is students will provide evidence for how sounds are produced based on their exploration. And the reason I added this second learning target is because that standard said that they're going to provide evidence that vibration makes sound. And so I took that second part of the standard. Now they're planning, and then they're going to use that investigation to then justify and provide evidence of what causes sound. Once you determine your 2 learning targets, you're going to come down to this 5E component. I'll get it all on one page. Lesson plan. And so we're doing a quick summary here. It's not a full extensive lesson plan. We will do the a full 5E lesson plan in topic 6, and then 3 days of a lesson plan for our benchmark assignment in topic 7. So this is just kind of like outlining some of those ideas, but do still be detailed. The more detail you provide, the better picture I get of what you're trying to explain. So in the 5E lesson plan, there's 5 E's, and that's why they call it the 5E lesson plan. If you haven't already, it's really important that you make sure you watch any of the videos or any of the support I provide that goes over the 5E lesson plan model in our discussion forums. I provide so much information in the forums, and I don't know how much you guys read it, but it really will help you with your assignments. So in this first box, you want to use your own words to describe this component as it relates to the science processes and practices. So let me show you what I mean. So when I look at the standard I have, we also have matching science engineering practices or science processes. You might see those words used synonymously. Essentially what they're saying is these science and engineering practices, or those like the scientific process, scientific method, those things. So this one, because students are planning and conducting investigation, that is actually one of the science and engineering practices embedded right into my standard. Students are to plan out investigations to answer questions. They need to test solutions to problems. And in kindergarten through 2nd grade, we build on prior experiences and progress to simple investigations. And they're based on just fair tests. These aren't complex investigations. So they'll be able to get data to support either their explanation of how it works, or to, when we think about answering questions, what causes sound is a question. So they'll provide data to support those explanations. And if they were trying to solve a problem, they would have a design solution to explain how they're solving the problem. And so that first one is just explaining how science works. The other one's in engineering a solution to a problem. So though we're wanting to look at how the 5E model connects to that practice and this standard. So let's go ahead and look at the 5E model. I just pulled up a quick website that tells me just what that part, what do each of the 5E stand for. So the first part is engage. And the purpose of this part of the lesson model is to pique students' interest and get them involved in the lesson. You're also using this time to pre-assess if they have any prior knowledge on this. And so when I click, it gives me a little more explanation on engage. So during this experience, students first encounter and identify a task. So you might ask them to, what do you know about sound? What have you heard about sound? Like, how do you think, what kind of sounds do we hear every day? And so you're getting that prior understanding, or you might play them a sound clip of maybe a beautiful orchestra. And you might say something like, how does sound relate to this orchestra? How does sound create such beautiful things? And what are the different sounds you hear in this orchestra? And so I'm just getting kids to think about the topic that I'm bringing up. So let's go back to that chart, and I want to use this in my own words to describe the component as it relates to the science and engineering practices. Well, what I'm thinking about this, kids are going to have to plan or conduct an investigation. That's what the science and engineering practice had mentioned that was connected to my standard. And so I'm going to have to get them excited and see what they know to be able to do that. So I'll explain here. Well, students need to be interested, and I need background to be able to have students plan and conduct investigations. And so I would go into a little detail. I can use scholarly sources to cite why I may think that or how it supports. And then I get to the explore phase. And I would do the same thing where I explain how it's connected to those science processes, the practices. And then for each of these, now I'm going to tell you an activity. So I'm going to ask students to listen to clip of orchestra. And I'm going to explain further that I'll have them listen to the different sounds and see how many different sounds they can identify or what types of sounds they heard, and get that background knowledge of how do you think, what other types of sounds do you hear? And so I'm going to provide then a rationale for this. So this is going to give me background knowledge, and it will get students interested and excited. And then I'm probably going to put a citation right there because that's something that I've read, something that I need to refer to, because it does ask that we do cite 2 to 3 scholarly resources here. And then you always want an in-text citation for anything that you have on your resource page. So if you read somewhere that engaging students means giving me background knowledge, cite that source. If you read somewhere that they get them interested, cite that source. And so that you can have a full and complete assignment. So you're going to go through each of these 5 components. You're going to tell me how it connects to science and engineering processes, give me an activity related to your standard, and then tell me the rationale for that activity, and how it'll be effective in engaging students. How is it effective in explorations? How is it effective in explaining? One thing I often see is in the explore phase, sometimes teachers are leading this time, and what they're essentially doing, sometimes I see them flip these 2 phases on accident. So in a direct instruction model, often the teacher starts and says, I do, watch me. and then explains it. Now you off you go and you try it, or we do it together. Well, in the 5E lesson plan model, that's not how we do it. We start with getting some background knowledge and getting them interested, and then we send them off to explore without ever telling them anything besides directions on how to go do the exploration. So let me go look at these other E's. So after we have engaged students, we go into exploration. The purpose of this is to get them involved with the topic and to get them to create their own understanding before you go in and teach. So by having students explore sounds and feeling, um, eh, different objects as they vibrate, that's going to give them a chance to build their own understanding. And so I'm not telling them that vibration is causing these sounds. It's them exploring it and giving them an active inquiry experience. So on the 5E lesson model, this is where that inquiry, that hands-on experience goes. Then you go down to the explain phase. This is where your teaching happens. You have the students come back to you, share what they found. Let the students be the givers of the knowledge, and you support them by providing them that academic language and asking questions, and then summarizing and clearing up misconceptions. In the explain phase, when students report, for example, when I did the sound activities with my students, they would say things like, I noticed moving or shaking when I felt it and I could see it. I could see the object moving or shaking. And so in the explain phase, that's when I came in and I said, oh, we call that moving or shaking vibrations. Did everybody see moving or shaking? And we have a conversation about it. And then we have to have them try to come up with some conclusions here. And so this is where some teaching could happen, is we introduce our vocabulary here. We never pre-teach the vocabulary before the inquiry experience. We come in when they need the word and we teach it to them. I wouldn't teach vibrations before this lesson. I would teach this after they have this experience to anchor that vocabulary into it. So this stage is that communication between peers. It's reflecting on what they did. It's helping them build their own understanding, and they get to summarize or explain their own ideas. And then you help them by giving the vocabulary and clearing up misconceptions. After they've done that and you've learned something, you can elaborate. So maybe you want them to go back and expand on this concept. Does the idea of vibrations happen all the time? Do you think that this has anything to do with sound? And let them go test other objects. They can elaborate on this idea. They can go apply it to new or unfamiliar situations. For example, maybe instead of exploring the objects, maybe you go outside and do a walk and listen for sounds and see, can you see that vibrating? Can you see that moving, that shaking? In the trees when you hear them rustle? Can you see that vibrating or shaking? When they're talking, let's feel our throats. And so you elaborate on this idea, and students are applying it or exploring it in new situations. And then the evaluation stage is just to see if students have learned. This is your assessment stage. So you want to know if they've attained understanding. So in my standard and my objective, I said that students will explore sounds and they will record what they see, hear, and feel. And then they're going to provide evidence for how sounds are produced. So I would want to know if students can provide me evidence that sound is produced through vibrations. It could be done through class discussions, although you want to be very careful to check for understanding from all students. So you'd have to visit every group and make sure they understood, or have students come and whisper to you how sound is produced as like a ticket out, or do some sort of writing on it or model on it. I like to use science journals. It's really great way for me to assess understanding without having to do something else. They could record their ideas throughout the inquiry activity. And then at the end, they can draw a conclusion, or I can give them a question and they can just show me, and then they can use evidence from their models on there. So this is your topic 2 assignment. You're going to finish with having some ideas for assessment, like I just talked about, looking in your science journal, having students talk about it. Make sure you support your activities with 2 to 3 scholarly resources, and let me know if you have any questions. Have a great afternoon.